everyone, and welcome to Revival Fire Online. I'm Apostle Marsha, Pedro, and I'm just inviting you to sit down, relax, and enjoy hearing what God has to say to you today on this broadcast. If you are on Facebook, why don't you go ahead and like and share this broadcast? And if you are on YouTube, you can subscribe to our channel and you can press that notification button because we upload content every single week. This evening, I'm going to finish up something that I started not last week, the week before, on the importance of community and taking territory. It seems like so long. It seems as if I haven't spoken to you guys in such a long time. But really, last week we just had our Miracles Now service, and oh, what a powerful time we had in the presence of God for the Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. But in this evening, I'm going to do a short recap of what we spoke of the last time, because as I said to you, I said in the first quarter of 2023, there were some things, some habits, some attitudes God wanted to shift, some things He wanted to establish so that we would live in quarter 2, 3, and 4 of 2023. We would live a smooth part, and we would have that easy transition as we take new territory. And there were some things that God wanted to establish in us, and I firmly believe that community is one of those things. He wants us to be to find our tribe. He wants us to get to that place of being plugged in, that this is no longer a season of isolation, but it's a season of reconfiguration. It's a season of restoration. And it's that time when quickly we find our place and get plugged into the body of Christ, so we can take territory. And what's a community? Because community is important when we're taking this new territory in 2023. What's community? And as I said, I'll recap a little. A community is a group of people living in the same place or having particular characteristics in common, or a group of people or a group of interdependent plants or animals growing or living together. So community speaks about being in other people's space, being in other people's lives, not just being by yourself. And again, community was created, it was demonstrated and endorsed by Jesus. And then we spoke about Acts chapter 2 verse 27, and we spoke about what does community look like, what does community do. And one of the things that we said, community helps with the discipline of commitment. And we said that in the new place that we are going, when we're taking new territory, we need someone to help us as we are going into that place. And we spoke about the book of Acts, and as the believers, there were times I'm sure they did not feel like praying, they did not feel like doing whatever they had to do, but they continued, they help each other on. So that's what community does. Community helps with discipline of commitment. Community protects, and I spoke about my own life and my experiences of my little community protecting. But I also spoke about Esther, and Esther said, hey, I was placed in this position, and I'm going to protect the Jews. I'm going to protect my people. And she said, if I die, I die, but I'm willing. I'm going to protect my community. So community protects. Another thing that community does, community preserves legacy. We need to have our legacy preserved. We need to think about generations and generations and generations, and community does that. And we speak in 2 Samuel verses chapter 9 verse 1 to 9, and David, when he goes and he asked about if there's anyone from the house of Saul whom he could show kindness to. And the community actually knew where Mephibosheth was, and the community was able to tell him there is someone. So the community looks out And you know, God wanted us to see this new territory that we're about to, a spiritual ground that not only we will access, but our children and our grandchildren, and they will not have to go through the warfare, because community preserves legacy. The community will look out for them. And then I started to talk about what community is not, because many times we can say what it is, but we don't have all the definitions, right? And we don't have all the examples, but I spoke about what community is not. And community is not control. And if you feel you're in that place where there is control, and you don't have the ability to express yourself, you don't have the ability to for freedom of speech, freedom of expression. Now understand, it's not about being corrected and wanting to have your personal freedom, and it's not about wanting to do your own thing, but community is not control. You're not being, you can't be controlled in community. If there's that level of control, then it's not community. I also said community does not have clones. And I spoke about leaders who sometimes draw a map to the throne of God, and they expect others to follow it. It's not about having clones. We have different DNA, physically, and likewise, we don't all manifest the Spirit of God in the same way. So in a community, you can be cloned. You can be similar, but a community doesn't have clone. And the final thing I was speaking about is community is not a house of critics. And I drew that example in John chapter 8 verse 1, when Jesus went to the Mount of Olives, and he came down again to the temple, and the teachers and all the self-righteous people, the Pharisees and all those people, they brought a woman who's caught in adultery. And they said, hey, here Jesus, here she is, she's caught in adultery. And that's what that community, that was what that religious group of people did to her. And they said, you know, in the law of Moses, we need to stone her and all of that. And Jesus said, you know, he did not criticize her. He had compassion, and he loved her. And I'm picking up now from the last day. Community is not a house of critics. You know, so they said, hey, Jesus, she has sinned. She's committed adultery. And in the law of Moses commanded us to stone such women. Now, what do you say? They were using this question to trap Jesus, to have a basis of accusing him. But Jesus bent down and he started to write in the ground with his finger. And they kept on prodding, questioning him. And he came up and he said, let any one of you who is without sin be the first to throw a stone at her. And again, he was her entire community right there. Jesus was, yes, community covers. I know I'm speaking about community is not a house of critics, but I also want to let you know community covers. Jesus was her entire community there, and her community covered her. And you know, and he said, woman, there are where are those that condemn you? And she said, no one, sir. And then he says, neither do I condemn you. And Jesus declared, go now and leave your life, and leave your life of sin. And as I said, a community does not, it's not a house of critics. There's a difference between criticism and counsel. There's a difference between criticism and counsel. Criticism says that you have sinned and you're a bad person. That's what criticism said. You have sinned. Woman, you're actually caught in the act of adultery. You have sinned. According to the law, you have to be stoned to death. You must die. You're not worthy to live. There's a difference between criticism and counsel. Criticism says, woman, you have sinned and you're a bad person. Criticism condemns you and defines your identity by your sin. That's what criticism. Criticism defines your identity by your sin, and it condemns you. Counsel acknowledges your sin but doesn't condemn you. It gives you advice on doing the right thing, and it encourages you to move forward and not shut down. Understand, if someone has a conversation with you, and if you're just normal, you don't have, offense and that kind of thing. And if they have a conversation with you and you feel as if you're condemned, you have to be mindful. Is this a criticism or is this counsel? Because many people say, I'm going to counsel you, I'm going to advise you, but what do? They really criticize you. Jesus is the greatest counselor that there ever was, because he was the living word. In the midst of community, you may see people who wish to be elevated above the rest. And in the midst of community, we always have people who wish to be elevated above the rest. And what do? They highlight your flaws. And that's a technique that may be used to make others intimidated and feel less than. So there are people in the community, there may be people in your life. They are intimidated by your success. They wish to be elevated above everyone else. And what do? They choose to highlight your flaws. That's a technique that makes others intimidated and feel less than. So community is not a house of critics. Why do you need to be in a community as you take new territory? And this is important. This is something that God specifically said to me, Marsha, employ this in your life. And of course, whatever he says to me, I want to share it with you, right? The territory that we are taking in 2023 is a place that requires several things. It requires several things, and might I say several disciplines. It requires strategy, it requires diplomacy, and it requires fortitude. That's a new place we're going into. Strategy, diplomacy, and fortitude. Let me explain to you these things and how that it's important when we are taking this new territory. And it's also important because we need to consider the people who would qualify to help us in the community with respect to the strategy execution, with respect to being a person who understands diplomacy and a person who has fortitude, and those who encourage us. So strategy. And strategy basically is a plan of action that would lead to your overall aim. You have a plan of action. This is how I'm going to do it. The overall aim may be to save $50,000 at the end of the day. You have a strategy. You have a plan. Or it may be to, at the end of the year, to increase your church membership if you're a pastor. There must be a plan. There must be an aim. So it's a plan of action that would accomplish the aim. In the new territory that you are going, you cannot execute the mandate in an ad hoc manner, just any old how. You cannot. The Lord gave the children of Israel strategy when they were going into the promised land. Strategy. The children of Israel did not just break free and go. They got strategy to be released. They got strategy to exit, and they got strategy to walk into. The Lord gave them strategy. Strategy can only be executed by those who understand success. I want you to understand this. Strategy can only be executed by those who understand success. If you do not understand success and the path to success, and if you don't understand, you will not be disciplined to sit and get that strategy download from heaven in 2023. You will not surround yourself with the people who will help you to get to that place of strategic alignment. You will not succeed. So strategy can only be executed by those who understand success. Strategy will only be appreciated by those who appreciate order. And this is really, really, really important for us to get in 2023. I was actually telling someone I have so many lists. I have so many tasks that I need to accomplish, but I have lists. And I have a list for the supermarket, a list for the church, a list for home, a list for this place, a list for that. And I have so many lists that I actually went to sleep and I had a dream about lists. And that's a serious thing. I just need to cut down on the thinking about the list, right? But I understand strategy and I understand order. Strategy will only be appreciated by those who appreciate order. You must have order if you are to have to successfully employ strategy in 2023 is a year when you don't do things in an ad hoc manner. When you are in the right community, there will be the appropriate resources to execute strategy, and that's important. When you are in the right community, now you can be in the wrong community, You can be in an old community when you should be in a new community. It's the community is something that just that is not laid in stone. You don't necessarily need to stay in this community for the rest of your life. We don't stay in a school, or we don't stay in a job or in a house for the rest of our lives. We shift things around. But when you are in the right community, there will be the appropriate resources to execute strategy. Notice when Moses sent out spies, and understand strategy, order, and the right time. The right time is so very important as we step out in strategy. Notice when Moses sent out spies, they came out with many and varied reports. Understand his community. Moses' community was different to Joshua's community. And understand your moral authority and your leadership authority has a lot to do with how you represent yourself and the decisions you make, and how well you stand on the decisions you make. Are you going to stand on the word of God? Are you going to stay there and not be moved, or are you going to strike the rock too many times? But Moses, notice when Moses sent out spies, they came back with many and varied reports. When Joshua sent out spies, they found favor. And that's something that we need to note: the timing, the leader, and the strategy. The Moses community were a group of people who followed for survival. That's important. What season are you in? Last year, I believe, or no, the year before, I would always tell you, God did not put you in this season to survive. He put you in this season to thrive. You need to understand, if you were in a surviving community before 2020, you got yourself into a thriving community in 2021, I believe 2022. But in 2023, you're not just staying and thriving, but I say and I speak things because that is my mandate, and that is what I attract, and that is what I give off. And every broadcast I end: live a life of passion, live a life in pursuit of him. My community is a life of passion. My community must feed my pursuits. My community must be people who live a life in pursuit, or who desire to live a life in pursuit of him. And Moses' community were a people who followed for survival. So people who followed for survival, and not people who followed for thriving, or not people who followed to take new territory, would not come back and say that the place is good, let's go, let's take out the land. People who follow for survival are people who will say, hey, we need to survive. And there were men like grasshoppers, and it was huge. Grasshoppers were the size of men, and it was terrible because they were thinking of survival. So you need to understand, the Moses community were a group of people who followed for survival. The Joshua generation are a group of people who follow and create legacy. There is a difference. Strategy. The Joshua generation are a group of people who follow and create legacy. If I perish, I perish. Marsha, Pedro is going to take new territory. Are you with me, or are you against me? And I've made that decision in this season. I understand God's plan. I seek him for strategy. I may not know the entire next 50 years of my life, but I know this year, and I know a couple years ahead. And I need to be with people who understand strategy, and who know that we're going to take new territory in 2023. If you're a person who don't understand strategy, if you're a person who are in the mode of survival, you cannot work in this community where we are taking new territory. So strategy is important in the territory that we are about to take in 2023. That's one thing. Another thing that's so bold, underscore, neon, so important is diplomacy. I have seen people use the same resume, the same skills, the same methods, the same political campaigns, the same interviewing techniques for so many years, but the season has changed, the time has changed, the mandate has changed, and they don't know how to deal and shift and move with the times now. Diplomacy is the art of dealing with people in a sensitive and tactful way. We must have diplomacy if we are to take new territory in 2023. And we must surround ourselves with a community who understands tact and diplomacy. You need to know how to carry yourself. You need to know how to negotiate. You need to know how to the mannerisms of different publics. Understand Esther, Queen Esther, she learned different mannerisms. I believe Ruth learned different mannerisms. She went to Naomi and said, Naomi, what do I do? I've never been in this place before. I've never been gleaning in a man's field before. What do I do? And Naomi says, this is what you do. You understand diplomacy, the art of dealing with people in a sensitive and a tactful way. We are about to enter new mountains of influence, and the way in which we deal with people will have to be different. New territory means new mountains of influence for some people. There are some of us who will have to learn new skills, and some of us will have to learn new languages. I can't speak of diplomacy and not mention King Solomon, and I think he was such a brilliant man of so good with people. I think his people skills were great. He understood how to talk to people, how to communicate, and he just had such great wisdom and influence. And I mean, I did not live in that time with him, but when I read the word comes alive, and I can imagine the when that man came in the place, his presence, his wisdom, his gait was just so great. And Solomon understood wisdom and wealth, and he had a way with words. And I mean, that's really actually charming. He understood wisdom and wealth, and he had a way with words. I recall the story of, we recall the story of the two mothers, where there were two mothers that came into him, and they were disputing, this is my child, and the other said, this is my child. And they had both given birth to a baby. But, and when Solomon said, okay, bring me let's cut the baby in half, and who's you get one half, and you get, because you both say it's your baby. And the real mother of the child said, hey, don't cut the baby, she can have the baby. And that was diplomacy. He understood in a sensitive situation. Now there could have been kings who would have said, listen, this is trivial, I don't want to hear this. No, he wasn't one of those. Understand, when you deal and treat with people with diplomacy and tact, you earn their respect and admiration. You earn their respect and admiration. You look at a politician who says, I have no time to speak to the primary school children, and I have no time to speak to, I don't know, whoever, the homeless people. And you do not have the respect and the admiration. But you look at a politician who goes kissing babies, and you look at a politician who takes off his jacket and wounds up his sleeve and plays, engages in a game of some sort or something that is outside of and he warms the heart of people. That's diplomacy. That's understanding how to deal with people in a sensitive way. And Solomon, he did that. And as a leader in this season, if you're a leader, you're a pastor, you're a prophet, you're a supervisor, whatever you are, ask God for wisdom and diplomacy. When you treat and deal with people, it's really you are really building that platform. You're building that perception of of you in people's mind. Solomon did not demonstrate fear or favor. It's important when we're operating and we're asking to be in that space of diplomacy, we never demonstrate fear or favor. Rather, he dealt with much diplomacy, and the true mother was identified. In this season, your ability to speak to and through a thing will be more important than your ability than your ability to fight against a thing. I want to repeat that because this is a word for somebody in this season. In this season, your ability to speak to and through a thing will be more important than your ability to fight against a thing. Will be more important than your ability to fight against a thing. So why do we need community to take new territory? We need community to help us with strategy. We need community to help us with diplomacy. And the last thing that we need in 2023, and we need the community to do, is to have fortitude. Fortitude speaks of courage in pain or adversity. There must be resistance when we are taking new territory. There must be resistance. And I mean, those of you who go to the gym, or those of you who do whatever, form of physical activity, about resistance training. If you're not to go into a new muscle structure, if you're to whatever, you are going to have some resistance training. There must be resistance when we are taking new territory. There must be disappointments when we are trying to establish ownership. There will be disappointments. However, our success will be dependent on our ability to have on us being able to encourage ourselves and surround ourselves with the people who can help us. Remember, we need to be like David in Ziklag, and we need to encourage ourselves in the Lord. That's what we need to do. We need to encourage. So in 2023, be mindful of strategy. We need to have strategy. We don't do things in an ad hoc manner. We need to have diplomacy. We need to watch how we speak. And there's something that God has been speaking to me about. Carry the anointing with dignity, Marsha, Pedro. Carry the anointing with dignity. And there are things that God has been saying to me. Teach my people, how do you wear a mantle? How do you wear a mantle? How do you qualify for a mantle? How do you use a mantle? How do you wear a mantle? Diplomacy, the way you treat and deal with people. And fortitude, can you encourage yourself? Are you in a place where the community encourages you? Because when you're taking new territory, there must be adversity. And now I'm going to share with you. You need the results of being in a community, what the community does for you. The community, you need to be in a community because the community breaks through in prayer. The community breaks through in prayer. The community covers you. Corporate prayer is one of the least attended but most important services, and I make no apologies in saying that. And every pastor will tell you that corporate prayer is one of the least attended but most important services. In Acts chapter 12, verses 15 to 17, we see Peter being imprisoned. So Peter, poor guy, he was imprisoned. And the word says in verse 5, Peter was therefore kept in prison, but constant prayer was offered to God for him by the church. Are you in a community that prays for you? We need to be in a community that prays and covers. While corporate prayer was taking place, we see an angel visiting Peter and freeing him and leading him out of the prison. So what was going on? Corporate prayer. That is why we need to be in corporate prayer. An angel comes, frees him, leads him out of the prison, the right path, the right street, the right avenue, the right Uber. I believe it will. If it were this time, he would say, okay, take this Uber, don't take this one, or take this cab. The angel may have just called up whatever transportation and say, hey, get out of this prison. Take whatever chip they put on you or whatever. But in verse 12, we read, so when he had considered this, he came to the house of Mary, the mother of John. So Peter was in prison. An angel visited him. He was freed, and he was put exactly right on the correct path to get out of the prison. And he came to the house of Mary and the mother of John, whose surname was Mark, where many were gathered together praying. And as Peter knocked on the door of the gate, a girl named Rhoda came to answer. Then she recognized Peter's voice because her gladness did not open the gate, but ran in and announced that Peter was before the gate. Why was she so happy? The community broke through in prayer for Peter. The community was praying for Peter. And while the community prays, you go and you take new territory. Peter had never had an encounter like that, I believe, with an angel and breaking out of jail. While the community covers, you go and you survey in silence in the night moments. While the community, while the community intercedes, what do? You go ahead and you break new ground. You go ahead and you take on the adverse forces that are coming up against your business or your organization. That's what a community breaks through in prayer. That's why you need to be in a community. You need to be in a community in 2023 because the community breaks through in prayer, and you will need that prayer support. Let me tell you, you will need that prayer support. I know what I'm talking about. You will need that prayer support. Another thing in 2023, why you need a community, because the community will provide. The community will provide. I don't think that there has been a season in my life when I have had this much compassion for the sick, the poor, and the destitute. The book of Acts, we read of the community providing for each other. Acts 4, 32 to 35 says, and the believers were in one heart and mind. No one claimed that any of their possessions were their own, but they shared everything they had. With great power, the apostles continued to testify of the resurrection of Jesus, and God's grace was so powerfully at work in them that there were no needy persons among them. From time to time, those who owned land or house sold them, brought the money from the sales, and put it at the apostles' feet, and it was distributed to anyone who had need. The community will provide. I know of many people who have been left without food, without housing, without jobs after the pandemic. There are so many people. Your community will provide for you in this next season. As we provide for each other, we break down the walls of prejudice and pride. This invites the Spirit of God to come in and dwell amongst us, ready to perform miracles on our behalf. Do you want to see miracles performed on your behalf? Feel for the sick. Feel for the needy. Give to them. Have compassion. Provide for God's people, and you will see God show up. So the community will provide in this season. Another thing that the community will do in this season is the community will help. The community will help. You do not have to do it by yourself in this season. As I said, we have a lot of work to do. It's one of the greatest harvests before the coming of Christ. We know that as a church. We know that as a body of Christ. And we know that in the world. There are so many things that are evolving even in the world, that we cannot do it by ourselves. And in Exodus chapter 18, Moses' father-in-law, he came to Moses. Moses had so much work to do. He had led the children of Israel out of Egypt, and he had much work to do. And he says, he told Moses, what you are doing, it's not good for you. It's not good for your health, Moses. You took these people, you and these people who come to you. So people were coming to him all the time for counsel, and Moses was the one person who was giving counsel. Are you the one person who is doing whatever you're doing in your business? Are you the one person in your home who is just providing, or the one person in your home who's doing everything? You need to get help. You need to seek help from your community. And he said, you and these people who come to you will only wear yourselves out. The work is too heavy for you. You cannot handle it alone. Listen now to me, and I will give you some advice, and may God be with you. You must be the people's representative before God and bring their disputes to him. And what he encouraged Moses to do is to get people to help him and shed the load. Moses was a leader in Egypt. He was the one who God instructed to lead people out of bondage. However, the work had become too much for Moses alone to do, and it was costing him his well-being and his relationship with his family. It was too much. Jethro advised Moses to delegate the responsibility of counsel to the other members of the community. Is there something that you are doing that can be delegated? And there are things that God has specifically spoken to me as a leader. Marsha, Pedro, you delegate, you form teams. You get into that place of getting structure, getting strategy, form teams, and have people do the work. Because if you're going to take new territory, if you're going to go into new places, you may not know where you're going, you may not see what you're going to do, but you can no longer have your time consumed with the same activities that you were doing before, because you will have no time to take new territory. So as I said, Jethro advised Moses to delegate the responsibility of counsel to the other members of the community. In Egypt, it was sufficient for Moses alone to lead and interact with the people, but in a larger place, help was needed. In the place that you are going to enter in 2023, you will need the wisdom and the help of your community. So the community will help. And the final thing that I have here that the community will do, and I know the community will do so much more for you in 2023 as you're about to find yourself and plug yourself. And there are some people who say they are in community, but they don't want covenant. And I told you that. Community means that you are accountable. Community means that at times you are vulnerable. And community means you're a contributor. You cannot say I'm in a community and you do not contribute. Members of our community are contributors, and members of our community are covenanters. I know that's probably not a word, but they enter covenantal relationship. Covenant means I show up in the community. Covenant means if one person is staying back because they need to do a lot of work, we all stay and we pitch in and we help that person. No one is left behind. Covenant says, in the community says, if someone doesn't come to work today, someone doesn't come to work for 5 days, someone doesn't come to church today, someone doesn't come to church for a certain, I am going to call them and say, hey, we're covenanted. You're my brother, you're my sister, you're my co-worker. What's going on? Are you okay? Do you need me to come get you? Do you need help? That's what community says. Community says, hey, I check for you. The last thing that community will do for you in 2023, the community will promote fairness. Fairness. You know, many times the enemy has isolated us in this Elijah syndrome, or even Jeremiah, I'm the only one, or even, Jonah, God, you're not fair. That syndrome where it's not fair, I'm just here alone, or God, you're not pouring out justice. In Acts 6:1, we hear in those days when the number of disciples was increasing, the Hellenistic Jews, so they complained and they said against the Hebraic Jews because their widows were being overlooked in the daily distribution of food. So here's what the 12 did. They gathered all the disciples and said, it would not be right for me to not do my job and in preparing for the sermons and all of that, so that I could just come and oversee and make sure that the food is distributed clearly. And what did they say? Brothers and sisters, choose 7 men from among you who are known to be full of the Spirit and wisdom. We will turn this responsibility over to them and will give our attention to prayer and the ministry of the word. In the book of Acts, we also read of the deacons being appointed. There were accusations of the food being unfairly distributed, and the people were becoming disgruntled. So people were becoming angry because they were living in a tight space together. In this season, your community will stand with you and ensure fairness. Your community will stand with you and ensure fairness. The deacons were appointed to distribute the food and ensure that it was done fairly. The pleasant thing is that they were not from another tribe or group, but right from amongst them. The people who will bring justice and fairness to you are right there in your community. They will be highlighted when the need arises, and they will speak on your behalf. That's what your community will do. They will bring fairness and they will speak on your behalf. Isn't it wonderful to have someone to work with you, to stand and to speak with you? There's such there's such blessing in unity, but there's such influence and such strength in numbers. And as I end now, I want you to reflect upon your life, because really this is something, as I was preparing these teachings, I realized I'm very, very passionate about community. Even in my church, I'm very, very passionate in my community and my little groups or my family or wherever I exist. I'm very passionate about community and being very conscientious and being very alert. Even as you reflect upon your life, you reflect on your upbringing and your current position in life. You may say, "Hey, Apostle Marsha, I'm still not sure. Can you give me a little more?" Here's some ways you can identify, because I have some ways you can identify. Do I have a community mindset, or do I have an isolation mindset? Do I have a mindset where I live and work and exist amongst people, or do I have a mindset where it is me, myself, and I, just alone? A community mindset says you think about the effects of your actions, you think about the effects that your actions will have on the community, the team or the class or the family, the church or the neighborhood. Think about it. If you're in a community, if you belong to a community, think about the effects it's going to have. If you stay home from work on a day when interest is paid, I'm just saying. Think about that. All the customers are going to come in to do a withdrawal. And you just feel like staying home. When you're in a community, you think about the effects and you say, "Hey, you know what? The team needs me today." So, the same thing about people. You're playing music and it's so loud, and you have elderly neighbors, or you simply know your neighbors need to sleep. So what do? You are conscious of it, conscious of the effects of your actions, and you play your music at a considerable decibel, and at a very reasonable time. You take off the music and you retire to other modes of entertainment. So that's a community mindset. An isolated mindset, you act based on how you feel at that moment, and it does not enter your mind that your actions will have an effect on others. That's an isolated mindset. You act based on how you feel at that moment, and it does not enter your mind that your actions will have an effect on others. Another example of a community mindset is you communicate clearly, effectively, transparently, and in a timely manner. That is so important. And I'll tell you something. Sometimes you're in a community and you're communicating especially transparently, and you realize that there are people who are shielded, or there are people who misuse your vulnerability and your transparency. Don't worry about it. Eventually you'll get the right community around you. But those who are in a community, they communicate clearly. "Good morning, I'm unable to come to work today because my son or my daughter got up with a temperature. However, when at 10 o'clock, when my babysitter or my housekeeper comes, I'm going to give him some meds. And at 10 o'clock, when he comes, I'm going to try to come to work, and I'll be there by midday." So that's a person in community. They communicate transparently. They communicate in a timely manner. We start work at 8, so you're probably like 6. By 6:15 the baby is up, or by 6:15 you're up, or 5 o'clock to spend time with God, and you notice your baby has a temperature. You communicate clearly, effectively, transparently, and in a timely manner. Yes, you do have sick days. Yes, you can stay at home. Yes, you have compassionate leave. But when you're in a community, you don't just say, "I'm staying home." When you're in a community, you don't just say, it doesn't matter, I have my days. When you have an isolation mindset, you don't communicate. And I know there are many people who need to break out of that mold. When you're isolated, you don't communicate. You don't even share your ideas. You may have ideas. You may think, okay, maybe we don't need to have bottles of water. Maybe we can get a water cooler and we can use cone cups, and then we can save money in that way. You don't share your ideas, your experiences, etc. with people, even the people in your own house. That's when you have an isolation mindset. And the final example I have, when you're in a community, you're a giver. And this is something that's really, really, really dear to my heart. And in the future, maybe not on camera, but in my other ministry appointments, I will be speaking about giving. You're a giver. If there's a need, you don't deny your need, but you are sensitive to the needs of others and you share, even if you only have one. When you're in a community and you have two, you give one. When you're in a community and you have a community mindset and you see someone who needs it more than you need it and they're in a really dire situation, you still give one, or you give half. You do something. That's a community. A hoarder. And listen, there are people who, there's always something you can give, something tangible. And I know people say, I'll give you my love, Apostle Marsha. Yes, your love is great. But when I go to the supermarket, I need something beyond love, okay? I need money. Yes, Apostle Marsha, I'll give you my time. Yes, there are times I need something more than your time. I don't just need to sit and talk or sit and have hugs with you. I need you to come help me do something. Come mix some cement. Come pull out some weeds in the garden. We need to do something. So that's community. In an isolation mindset, you are a hoarder. You stop any excesses and you try to get more for yourself. You stop. The only people you may help is just your family. Just your family. Even if you help them at all. You are always thinking of a way to get more money and get more resources. You are never thinking of a way to be a blessing. That's an isolation mindset. God wants us to live with each other and learn to operate in community. Heaven is a great big community and we all desire to go there. I hope everyone does. Let's set our hearts on Christ and plug into his community. Let's share his love and let's walk in his ways. Let's walk in community. I hope you enjoyed this broadcast. Please join me again next week. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you're looking on the replay, join me again. I will have more exciting content. And I just want you to live in community, live with his love, and live with his people. Until my next video, until my next broadcast, this is Apostle Marsha Pedro saying, live a life of passion. Live a life in pursuit of him.